There's some really cool ancient artifacts that have been found, throughout history, but what about all the missing gold, all the treasure we always hear about in legends and stories? Well, it turns out that there actually is missing pirate treasure out there in the sea, and today we're going to be talking about some of it. So let's just jump right in. Now, it's said that somewhere in Austria's Lake Toplitz lies gold that was sunk by SS officer Ernst Kaltenbrunner. Its value? It's estimated to be in the billions, about 5.5 billion. Over the course of World War II, the Third Reich had amassed a bunch of gold. And other stolen treasures, and in order to keep it out of the hands of the Allies, they hid it. And the gold has never been found. Some even think the whole story is basically just an urban legend, but it really wouldn't be all that surprising for this to be true. I mean, the lake was used as a naval testing site by the Germans during the war, and in 1959, a whole bunch of counterfeit money was retrieved from the lake that they'd been planning on using to sabotage Britain's economy. So it's not like Lake Toplitz hadn't been used by the Germans before. The big challenge, though, in finding all this sunken gold, if it really is there, is that the lake is pretty deep and it's a bit treacherous. It has layers of logs and debris, and the visibility is really poor. There have been treasure hunters that have set out to try and find the gold, but over the years, 5 divers have died doing so. Amaro Pargo is one of the most famous Spanish privateers and pirates from the pirate era. He would attack and plunder ships who were enemies of the Spanish crown. But something very unique, which has really added to Pargo's kind of heroic status in history, was that he was very charitable. He donated a good amount of his plunder to the poor. He was kind of a Robin Hood-like figure. He died in 1747, and that's when stories started to circulate about his treasure chest. In his will, he described a wooden chest that he kept in his cabin containing gold coins, pearls, precious stones, jewelry, rich fabrics, Chinese porcelain, even paintings that had to have been a very big wooden box. But for as large as it must have been, he hid it really well. His home was one of the first places treasure hunters checked. It was sacked in the years following his death, but nothing turned up. And till this day, the location of his treasure chest is still unknown. Next up, we have Montezuma's lost treasure. It's said that the Aztec emperor Montezuma II had amassed a massive fortune in gold, silver, and jewels. He was ruling over Mexico at the time, and when Hernan Cortez and his fellow conquistadors showed up in 1519, he was actually rather fascinated by these foreigners at first, but it would be a mistake getting too close to the conquistadors, who, after getting a glimpse at all the wealth and treasures in the Aztec capital, got incredibly greedy. Greedy enough to stage a massacre, slaughtering hundreds and hundreds before holding Montezuma captive. But the Aztecs were rising up, and by 1520 the Spanish were forced to retreat. But they made sure to take off with as much gold and treasure that they could carry. In their escape, though, one of their vessels sank, and along with it, a huge amount of stolen gold. Gold which has never been found. At least the bulk of it, anyway. In 1981, a centuries-old gold bar turned up in Mexico City, found by a construction worker, but the rest of the stash is still out there, just waiting to be found. Let's talk about some more pirate treasure, Blackbeard's treasure. Edward Teach has to be the most infamous pirate in history. He plundered tons of ships full of gold, silver, and other treasures, sailing from Mexico and South America back to Spain. So it comes as no surprise that his stash of plundered treasure is said to be hidden somewhere out there. But before his death in 1718, Blackbeard cryptically claimed that his treasure was hidden in a location known only to himself and the devil. And ever since, treasure hunters have been on the hunt for it. And for centuries, nothing turned up. That is until 1996. Blackbeard's ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, was discovered off the coast of North Carolina by private salvagers. Pretty amazing discovery on its own, of course, but there wasn't much in the way of treasure other than a small collection of gold artifacts. Over the years, there have been tons of theories about where Blackbeard's treasure could be, but it's still out there, again, just waiting to be found. Next on the list, we have the treasure of Lima. So Spain's grip on Lima dates back to the 16th century when it conquered the Inca Empire. over time the Roman Catholic Church amassed an immense treasure in Lima. But in the early 19th century, during wars of independence in South America, the Viceroy of Lima made the decision to transport the city's riches to Mexico for safekeeping. This treasure trove, including precious jewels and 2 solid gold statues, was valued at about 12 to 60 million. Captain William Thompson was given the mission of transporting all this valuable cargo aboard the Mary Dear. But Thompson and his crew had a little chat, and they decided they wanted things to go a little differently. You know, like, why hand a bunch of treasure over to authorities when you can just slaughter the guards and make off with all the goodies yourselves? Well, that's exactly what they did. Then they buried the treasure and planned to rendezvous later to divvy it all up. But the Mary Dear was seized, and most of the crew were hanged for piracy. Somehow Thompson and his first mate, James Alexander Forbes, struck a deal, though, to lead the Spanish authorities to the treasure's location. They guided them to Cocos Island before escaping, ran off into the jungle. Thompson was never seen again, nor was the treasure. Believed he made his way to Newfoundland with the help of a whaling ship, though, while Forbes settled in California. Menkaure's sarcophagus. In the 1830s, Howard Weiss, an English military officer, embarked on explorations of the Giza pyramids, employing some pretty reckless methods. Modern archaeologists would just have a coronary watching this guy work. Mainly, he'd make his way through ancient structures using explosives. That's very reckless. And during his explorations, Weiss made some big discoveries, one of which was an elaborately decorated sarcophagus found within Menkaure's pyramid. And now the sarcophagus is missing. The story goes that Weiss was very eager to transport this remarkable artifact to England, so he arranged for it to be shipped aboard the merchant vessel Beatrice in 1838. But then the ship sank, taking the precious sarcophagus down with it. And to this day, the whereabouts of the Beatrice and the sarcophagus are still unknown. The Royal Casket of Poland. In 1800, Princess Isabella Czartoryska of Poland assembled the Royal Casket, which was a treasure trove of artifacts from the country's royal families. The collection included jewels worn by Polish kings, there was works of art, tons of precious items from various nobles throughout the country's history. Poland had recently lost its independence, and the Royal Casket was this very real physical reminder of the country's rich history and their heritage. Well, then World War II happened, and as the war spread across Europe, the Royal Casket, along with an extensive collection from a museum, was hidden away in a secluded repository within a palace outbuilding for safekeeping. But when a German mill owner who'd worked under the owners of the museum gave away the location of the items to the invading German soldiers, well, they broke into the palace, seized the royal casket, and looted it. The treasures were divided up amongst the SS soldiers, never to be seen again. And the Third Reich strikes again with the robbery of a piece by Michelangelo himself, the Mask of a Faun. During World War II, the Third Reich were notorious for plundering valuable artifacts, and one of these was the Mask of a Faun from the Castello di Poppi, a castle in Tuscany. The robbery was carried out over a brief window between August 22nd and the 23rd, 1944. It said that they swiftly seized the mask and stashed it away in one of their trucks, presumably intending to add it to their growing collection of looted treasure, and it's never been seen again. Maybe it's at the bottom of Lake Toplitz, but I wouldn't count on it. There's a good chance this, along with a ton of other art, was just destroyed during attacks, and that's not even including all the artwork and literature that the Third Reich intentionally did away with. Now, we can't talk about pirate treasure and World War II looting without bringing up Wild West cowboy loot. In the late 19th century, during all the chaos that was the Wild West, rumors began circulating of a vast treasure hidden in the rugged terrain of Skeleton Canyon along the Arizona-New Mexico border. According to legend, a band of outlaws led by a man named Juan Garcia raided a Mexican army payroll shipment in the 1880s. They fled to the remote Skeleton Canyon, and Garcia and his gang supposedly buried the stolen loot somewhere in an underground cavern. There have been tons of searches over the years for this loot, with various bands of outlaws fighting and dying while searching for it, but never been found. And finally, we have the missing treasure of William Kidd, which may be the most heavily sought after pirate treasure in history. Captain Kidd was a Scottish French sailor turned pirate who's employed as a privateer by European monarchs to target enemy ships and safeguard trade routes. But all that time spent out at sea led to Kidd eventually succumbing to piracy himself. He broke bad and he started prowling the waters of the Indian Ocean. And Kidd became a pretty good pirate. He amassed a fortune in plundered riches, and he started boasting of a buried treasure worth a pretty hefty sum. Now, only a fraction of his wealth was ever recovered from Gardiner's Island off the coast of Long Island, New York, and presented as evidence against Kidd during his trial for piracy. He tried to bribe the British authorities by revealing the location of his hidden treasure as a bargaining chip, but he was just hanged instead. Pirates started setting out afterwards to try and claim his lost treasure, but nothing was ever found. With all that said though, I've been your host James, and I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video. Menkaure's sarcophagus.